Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, Desiree. It's good to see you. It's good to see all of you, to be here and not only to worship, but to hear God's word. God has a word for you, and may your ears be attentive to hear what He has to say. We are continuing this sermon series called Blessed, and the acronym of that sermon series, B, stands for Begin with Prayer. We did 2 sermons on that already. We are moving into the next acronym, which is Listen with Care. From there, we're going to go a sermon called Eat Together. Guess what Sunday that's going to be on? The picnic, when we all come together to eat. And then we're going to do a couple of sermons on Serve with Love and conclude the series, S, with Share Your Story. That acronym. It really... the intent is to provide a model that is very simple, user-friendly, biblically affirming, of how to speak to people when God brings an opportunity, you build a relationship with someone who doesn't know the Lord, how to talk to them, where to begin, and you end up to a place where the Lord opens up the privilege to you to share the gospel. So, like I said, last week we began with begin with prayer. And today we start the series called Listening with Care, to listen with care. So let's begin. Some time ago, I was taking a counseling class that was taught by Dr. Gary Collins. He is a professional counselor. He's a professor at Trinity Divinity School, professor of pastoral care. Written numerous books on counseling, and one that I read, that book that he wrote was called How to Be a People Helper. How to Be a People Helper. And I remember, I've taken so many classes with different people, I just remember one thing from that book. And I remember one thing from the class on counseling, and that was this. He said, if people listen well to hurting people, that act of listening would resolve more than 60% of people's problems. Again, he said, if people listen well to hurting people, the very act of listening would resolve 60% of people's problems. In other words, the most effective element in helping people in a counseling situation is simply listen with care. And then he joked, and he said, and so if people just did that to one another, 60% of the counseling ministry agencies will be closed. I really do. This is Gary Collins. You get to his books. He has great things to say and to teach. It reminds me of a couple of scripture verses. In Proverbs chapter 1, it says, let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance. That's in Proverbs. In Job, he wrote this, I waited while you spoke. I listened to your reasoning while you were searching for words. So when you meet new people, you're going to meet new people. We all meet new people here and there. Or let's say someone comes to you and they're seeking advice. Make it your priority, first and foremost, to listen well. You don't have to talk, talk less. Do less saying or communicating. Listen more, and you will actually help them with their difficulties and problems just by listening. We read this, and I'll read it again, James chapter 1. Remember this, my dear friends. Everyone must be quick to listen, but slow to speak and slow to become angry. Here's another, I think this is a great verse, and it speaks about God's listening. This is in Psalms 10. Lord, you have heard the desires of the humble. You will strengthen their hearts. You will listen carefully. I love that phrase. Not only because it's part of my sermon, but I love the phrase that's in this verse. It says about God, listening carefully. And that's our main topic of today's sermon, and that's also the main text or the main theme in the text that we're going through in Luke chapter 18. From there we can learn that a blind man, the beggar, He cried out for mercy, and Jesus stopped to listen to him. And in the process of listening, Jesus listens to many different levels. It's just the nature of God. He listens to many different levels of what is being communicated. And after listening, Jesus answered that request. So I have an acronym. I'm going to run through it quickly. You have it probably in your notes. I'm going to use the acronym HEAR, H-E-A-R, HEAR, to outline this particular sermon. So let's begin. First one is a heart, okay, H for heart cry. Heart cry of the beggar. In Mark chapter 10, Mark has the same story, and I'm going to read what he says there, just one verse. They came to Jericho, and as Jesus was leaving with his disciples, a large crowd, a blind beggar named Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, was sitting by the road. So Mark gives the name of this blind man. His name was Bartimaeus. And what's his condition? Well, duh, he's blind, okay? But what does that mean? It could be many things, circumstances, a situation of a blind man's life. He has this particular disability. And because he had that disability, it required that he spend his life dependent upon others for their help. Maybe in the process of this, because it's a religious community, maybe he heard it said, maybe overheard it said, he's blind because of sin. He's blind because of some curse. That's why he's conditioned. Can you imagine hearing that over and over again and thinking, my blindness is my fault out of some condition of my heart? It says he's a beggar. What does that imply? Well, it implies economically, he's dependent upon the charity of others. He is possibly categorized as the expendable. Maybe the last, the least, the ones who are left out. Most likely he had no education, no training, no employment, no marketing skills. So he has to beg for his needs, to have his needs met. However, he needed more than what people can normally give. And by the way, have you ever been in a situation like that in your own life? Don't know. Have you ever been unemployed? Ever felt untrained, unskilled on something? Have you ever felt that people stare at you and create opinions that are negative about you because of who you are, where you're at? Have you ever wished for help? Maybe don't get it from people around you. And maybe deep in your heart, like this particular Bartimaeus, have you ever felt, I wish someone would just listen to me? Just listen to me. Pray, maybe just help me. I need just someone to have compassion. Look again, Luke chapter 18, verse 36 and 37, 38. When he heard the crowd going by, he asked, what is happening? He wanted to know. And they said to him, Jesus of Nazareth is passing by. And he called out, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on you. And I wonder if any of you ever felt like, I just need some mercy. I'm going through something. I just need someone to come alongside me in this situation. So the first point simply is here, that is the heart cry of Bartimaeus. And I'm just asking, have you ever been in a situation where you had a heart cry, calling out to God? Second point, E for express censorship. Express censorship. The crowd. Look what it says in verse 39. Those who led the way rebuked him and told him to be quiet, but he shouted all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. In this world, there exist people who have absolutely no desire to listen to you. It's true. There's people around that don't care. Here, in this particular situation, there's a whole group of them that actually are telling the beggar, shut up. Cutting him off. They don't want to hear him. They don't want to hear his situation. They don't want his interruption. They want him to stay away. And why is that? Well, I made me think about this, and it made me think about beggars around the world and down the streets here in Houston streets, and think about why would people shut that person away, particularly Bartimaeus here? Maybe because listening requires that you do it carefully. Maybe because listening requires time. Maybe they don't want to spend the time. Maybe because when you actually have to listen to someone, it causes, and you know it's going to cause you to want to have to help in some way when you hear their story. And that group doesn't care in this story. That group doesn't want to take the time to hear. That group doesn't want to help. They actually are hindering Bartimaeus. They're actually blocking the way so that his request won't be made. They're actually hindering him from coming to Jesus. I don't know if you've ever gone through that. That maybe your friends or your peers or a group that you're with, they're actually a hindrance to you coming to Jesus. Maybe that group, when you want help from Jesus, maybe that group says, we don't want to hear it, and they shut you up. Have you ever been around people like that? I'm just wondering. Yeah. So I have a confession. Maybe I was one of those. I didn't want to hear it. Talk about Jesus and stuff like that, and I don't want to hear your testimony, your stories, and maybe, maybe you're the one who's hurting, and people are directing you elsewhere, not to Christ, not to God. People obstruct your situation. They hinder your pathway to blessing and your pathway to healing. And they want to shut you up and shut you out. I think many of us maybe have experienced some things like that. To stop you and to keep you from the blessings and the true hope and freedom that you have. However, Bartimaeus is actually determined to be heard. So he shouts, and he's going to be heard over the crowd. He's very determined to move forward and to obtain whatever, let's call it the blessings. And he's determined even to receive mercy. And by the way, mercy could be simply, I just want some income. I just want a little bit of pity, a little bit of compassion. Maybe he's wanting more than that. Perhaps maybe he wants a miracle. He wants to be heard. And this time he's not going to be shut up or shut out. That he's going to move past the noise of the crowd, and he's determined to be heard. He's desperate. And so I have a question to you as I go through this before I get to the next part. You ever get to a place where you say, enough? I am going to move with all I got to get from God the blessing that I really want. I am not going to hinder myself. I'm not going to let anyone else hinder myself. I am going to go past the noise, past the obstacles, whatever it is, and I'm going to obtain what I desperately want from God. You ever come to that place where you push forward like that? Think about that. Fourth point, audience with Christ. Audience with Christ, the Son of David. Verse 40 and 41, Jesus stopped and ordered the man to be brought to him. And when he came near, Jesus asked, "What do you want me to do for you?" "Lord, I want to see." Christ heard Bartimaeus cry. He heard the cry for mercy. He heard also, and the Lord is discerning. He knows the most inner parts of our thinking. He knows what's going on in our hearts. And though our words may say one thing, sometimes that word in our hearts are in alignment. But sometimes our words are not exactly what's really in our hearts. And the Lord can hear the deepest part of our hearts. And he is hearing the inner voice and the inner cry of Bartimaeus. He knows that there is this internal desire Bartimaeus has, and Jesus hears that. Although Bartimaeus asks for mercy, God knows, Jesus knows, Bartimaeus wants something more. Something more. So Jesus stops. And he asked the question, what do you want? And I thought to myself, Lord, you know what he wants. Why are you asking, what do you want? Bartimaeus gains his audience with Jesus, and Jesus stops to listen. And can I rephrase maybe Jesus' question to Bartimaeus? Could Jesus be saying, do you, Bartimaeus, want more of the same that you've been asking anybody, which is mercy, alms? Do you want that pity or a little temporary relief or help? Is that what you want, Bartimaeus? Or could Jesus be saying, Bartimaeus, what do you want? Meaning, do you want more? What do you really want? Are you desirous for something greater and something bigger to happen? Bartimaeus, what do you want? Questions are, by the way, questions are significant. One day, for your interest, go through the Gospels, peruse all of them, and mark down all the questions Jesus asked, and you answer those questions. Answer those questions. And if Jesus were here today, which he is, and he was to ask you, because he knows your condition, and he asked, what do you want? Terry, what do you want? He said, Russell, what do you want? John, what do you really want from Jesus? If he was to ask you that, how would you respond? Do you want more of the same? Or are you wanting something greater and deeper from God? What do you want? Final point in this acronym here, R stands for request clarity and respond to core needs. Request clarity and respond to your needs. What do you want? And Bartimaeus says, I want to receive sight. I want to see. So he switched from mercy to I want to see. And Jesus can see in his heart, and he says, okay, you will, because I see in you that you have faith for this, and you'll be healed. I don't have it in your notes, but sozo is a Greek word for heal, by the way. S-O-Z-O, sozo. It's also the same word for save. And we often, as Christians, say, do you want to be saved? Sozo. Which is, again, the same translation. You can say, heal. And Jesus says, you will be sozo. That's more, by the way, that's more than physical healing. And you see the more happen, you see the evidence of that in Bartimaeus' response. What is Jesus doing by asking that question? It's not that Jesus doesn't know. By the way, he asked you a question. The Lord already knows what's going on. It said we need to recognize something when he asks a question. He's trying to reveal something to us when he asks a question. And Jesus asked this question because he's trying to reveal, Bartimaeus, I want you to think about what's going on and reflect, what do you want? So he's challenging Bartimaeus to go from the general to the specific, from the temporal to the spiritual, from the impersonal to the personal. Jesus is listening with care to Bartimaeus, and he's challenging, in a sense, Bartimaeus, you too, listen. What is it that you want? Go deeper, Bartimaeus. Let's go deeper. Think it through. What do you really want? And that's the purpose of that question. So you would do that. Psalm 110, I read this, and I want to read it again because I think it's a great verse. I read it from the beginning. Psalm 110. Lord, you have heard the desires of the humble. You strengthen their heart. You will listen carefully. And he does. He listens carefully to you and me. Did you know that when God hears carefully, that means he's also going to hear and answer your prayer. When God hears your requests, and a request given in faith, that soul cry, that request is going to be answered. In John 1, verse 5, chapter 5, verse 15 says this, and if we know that he hears us, whatever we ask, we know that we have what we asked of him. I don't know, you want that? Tell the Lord when you're praying next time, Lord, are you hearing me? And the Lord will say, what do you really want? I hear what you're saying. The words are coming out of your mouth. But tell me what's really in your soul. What do you really want? And you have faith for me to answer that request. And the Lord says, when I hear you, when I really am listening to you, and you are praying with faith in me, caveat, according to his will, he will answer that request. Today, do you need healing? Do you need forgiveness? Do you need direction? Do you need some provision? Do you have some situation you're crying out for God? You want him to work? When Jesus heals, there's Bartimaeus in the story. Look at Bartimaeus' response. It says immediately he received his sight and he says, follow Jesus praising God. That's the appropriate response. Anytime God answers, our response should be just like Bartimaeus. I want to be a follower. I want to follow him. That too should be, like I said, our response. Now, there are 4 points that I have for response that I am going to allow you to study on your own, to look at it in the table fellowship, and I'm using the same acronym here because as the Lord listens carefully, he wants us to practice that with others. As I said in the very beginning, if you want to be, I'll put it this way, if you want to be known for a great counselor, say less and listen more to when people come to you. And just ask them questions. What do you mean by that? What do you think about this? But advise less and increase your listening skills. How can you listen with greater care? I'll just give you those acronyms. We're going to go over that in the table fellowship. Hear their cry. Hear the heart cry of these people. In other words, go beyond the words. In Job chapter 32, it says this, I waited while you spoke, and I listened to your reasoning while you were searching for words. Notice, he doesn't say I talked, I listened. Peter Drucker said this, the most important thing in communication is to hear what isn't being said. Because you got to hear the other language, what's going on. That's the most important thing. Next acronym, E, express empathy. When someone comes to you, or when you go to someone, do what it says here in Romans chapter 12. Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. Empathize with their situation. A, allow an audience. What do I mean by that? Listen, stop, take time. In terms of quantity and quality, stop, pay attention, stop. My daughter's here, Mariana, my daughter's here from Houston, from Florida. I'll tell you a quick story. She used to do this to me. My mind would run all kinds of different directions when she was a little girl. And she would do this regularly at 3 or 4 years old. And she would come to me, Papi, Papi, Papi. She wanted to say something to me. And she knew intuitively that my mind wasn't concentrating. I want to talk to you, I want to talk to you, I want to talk to you. She would do this. She would start talking to me. She said, wait. And then she'd reach up to me and grab my face, because she's always looking at something else, and she would turn it and pull it down to her eye, and she would hold me while she talked to me. We need to stop when we're with people, and I just have to allow an audience, meaning stop and listen. Take the time. Someone needs your ear. Someone needs your empathy. And you can be an incredible help to people if you just took some time to really listen to them. And that's what the friends I have to Job, that's what they did. Job was hurting. He lost his income. He's lost his family. He lost so much. He's really hurting. And it says that they just sat down and they basically just empathized and listened to him talk. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said this: he who can no longer listen to his brother will soon no longer be listening to God either. How important it is to listen to others. And in this series, God's going to bring people who don't know the Lord, maybe someone who's really far from the Lord, that just needs you to listen to them. Just listen to them. Finally, R, request clarity and respond to core needs. And in table fellowship, we'll get deeper to that. So I want to end with a final quote. I'm ending, no story today, just a final quote. You can come out. George Eliot was an author. It was a woman who used that as to write under. She used her name was Mary Ann something, I forget what it is, but as an author, she used George Eliot. And she said this: "Oh, the inexpressible comfort of feeling safe with a person, having neither to weigh thoughts nor measure words, but to pour them all out, just as they are, chaff and grain together, knowing that a faithful hand will take and sift them, keep what is worth keeping, and then, with the breath of kindness, blow the rest away." And she's describing a friend, right? You can go to, if you have one or two really close friends, you know that you can just pour your heart out and they'll sift through what's not good and they'll just take whatever, and you can just really be open with them. And we have that with Jesus, right? Jesus is a friend that sticks closer than a brother. But Jesus, you're the hands and feet of Jesus, and he wants you to be that with someone. That people can come to you and just pour their heart out, and they know that you will listen to them, not critically, but you will listen to them and watch. That careful listening will be healing to their soul, because you will eventually hear their core issue. God may open up an opportunity for you to pray for them and to just help answer their requests. I want to say, someone listened to you. God listened to you carefully. This is why you're here, why you're following the Lord, because God listened to you and someone listened to you, and he wants you to listen to someone as well, carefully. Again, I'll close with this Psalm 10 verse. "Lord, you have heard the desire of the humble. You will strengthen their hearts. You will listen carefully." God will listen carefully. Let's all do that as well with each other, okay? Let's pray.